And so there's a beautiful meditation that I talk about in the book, which is called a question meditation. It was probably one of my favorite techniques that I learned. And often when we ask questions, Brendan, to the world at least, or to the universe, they're often demands, they're not questions. They're like, why is this happening to me? You know, that's not a question. That is pain. A question is the way you're asking me questions. Like, Jay, I'm really curious. How does this work? It's what's known as a sincere request or a deep intention, right? And so a question meditation is, I want you to sit with the question that causes you anxiety and pain. And I want you to ask it with sincerity, with genuineness, with love and understanding. And I want you to allow yourself to not force the answer to come to you in that moment, but allow yourself to discover the answer throughout the day. And just sit with it. And if you sit with it sincerely, I guarantee you there will be someone, something that happens in the day. It could be a message, a billboard you see, and it will just shift the way you start seeing divine intervention everywhere in your life. And that's, it really works. So I would just say sit with that question.
Need motivation?
Watch a top 10 with Believe Nation.
Top 10, I got a top 10. Got my motivation high for my top 10. Gotta learn from the wise women and men all my life. Like na 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 na. For my top 10, top 10, na 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 na. This one's for my top 10.
Hey, it's Evan Carmichael, and I make these videos because chances are you are the most ambitious person in your circle, but you know you're capable of more, and you get that push by surrounding yourself with the best. So today, let's learn from one of the best, Jay Shetty, and my take on his top 10 rules for success. Enjoy. Rule number 2, study success.
One of the biggest mistakes we make is we don't study the stories of the greats. So how many people's lives have you studied from start to finish?
Yeah.
If you've studied someone's life from start to finish, I genuinely believe this is like the core skill that's needed. I would say that the people I admire, I have studied their lives from start to finish. I know why they made bad decisions, what they consider to be good decisions. Like, there's autobiographies and biographies out there. There's podcasts like ours where people can come and listen to people's stories. If you've not studied someone's story, then you can't follow that path, because every time you hit a rejection, so every time I get rejected, I think of Steve Jobs getting kicked out of his own company.
Crazy, isn't it?
Every time I fail, I think about Michael Jordan losing a game. Every time I get tired of training, I think about Cristiano Ronaldo putting in that extra rep. Those are the visual cues that we need, but you only get those visual cues if you've done the research and the study. And then you go, oh, if Steve Jobs was kicked out of his own company, but then still had the audacity at one point to go and build Pixar, then I think I'm all right if I just didn't get this job.
Rule number 3, be present.
We don't have to wait to have to experience a near-death experience to have stillness.
Right.
But that stillness, you experience so much stillness and space and silence because you were so in your moment and in that body where everything was revealed to you, and that's what you went through. Yeah. And I'm not saying that you can manufacture that. That is very unique to Brendan. But what I am saying is, if you sit with yourself every single day and be present with your body and mind, they will inform you. When people do this, they say to me, Jay, I've had a backache for probably 6 months now. I didn't notice it till now. Or Jay, you know what? Actually, I just really found this new idea that's going to change my business, because the answers are there inside of you. But because we don't sit with ourselves enough, and there's a beautiful statement in the Buddhist tradition, the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, that says, what movement does for your body, stillness does for your mind. So just think about what movement does for your body, the energy, the expansion, the confidence. That's what stillness does for the mind.
Rule number 4, be proactive in giving.
We have to become proactive and not reactive in our giving. I remember there was a time when literally every week, every month, I'd get a new notification from a friend saying that they were just giving. They were running for a marathon. They were trying to raise some money for charity. They were doing all these different things. And you get a little thing that says, fill this out and please donate some money. Now, most of us do that in an office setting, in a work setting, in a social setting. More, it's what I call guilt giving as opposed to compassionate caring, right? It's not proactive, purposeful, support, it's guilt giving. You feel guilty. You think, oh God, if everyone in the office gives and I don't give, how are they gonna feel? Or, you know, everyone in my family is giving $10 and I'm not giving $10. And that actually reduces the passion and the purpose and the love we get from giving. That reduces that generosity, because we're wired for generosity. We're not wired to be forced to give. We're not wired to guilt giving. So recognize that when you feel yourself guilt giving, make the switch. Think, actually, if I'm giving this, ask yourself, am I giving for a purpose I know about? See, there's levels in which you can give as well. If you give without even knowing where it's going, you give without how the person's gonna use it, that's not gonna fulfill you, that's not gonna help you grow. But if you know where that money's going, if you know what use it's going to, if you actually get involved and put time into a homeless shelter, helping the elderly, helping children, whatever it may be, when you start getting more conscious about the way you give, you will start to see the difference. So be proactive, don't be reactive. Not just when your friend's a marathon. If you only give in that way, you're nurturing guilt giving, not compassionate. I really recommend that you look at something where you know you have an impact on people's lives. Look at your career, think of what skills you have. I guarantee you there's somewhere out there, someone that could benefit with that skill if you just took it to the streets once a month. And the satisfaction, what's that video? Find the Do Something for Nothing campaign. What's their video? All it takes is a small act of kindness, going out on the streets, taking your skills to the streets, sharing them with someone, sharing them with people, trying to help organizations.
Hey everyone, I have been reading a bit from my friend's book, Evan Carmichael, Built to Serve, and I wanted to share this with you. So, according to a study by Carnegie Mellon University, people with supportive spouses are more likely to give themselves the chance to succeed. They studied 163 married couples and found that people with supportive spouses were more likely to take on potentially rewarding challenges. Those who accepted challenges experienced more personal growth, happiness, and psychological well-being. Now, I can truly say that I've experienced that in my life. When I first met my wife, I was just starting out. I had never released a video. I hadn't created any content, and she was such an important part of feeling supported on that journey. So whether you're in a relationship, whether you're dating, whether you're married, or even if you're single, being supported by friends and a strong community is important. Built to Serve by Evan Carmichael. Great book on how you can find your purpose, and also on reminding us that we can all make a difference in the world. Thanks, Evan.
Rule number 5, shift your thinking.
I think sports is great mental training, because you have to show up to the next game even if you lost and you don't feel bad.
Exactly.
Like you don't feel good, sorry. And one of the things, before I dive into that question, one of the things that you reminded me of was the Last Dance documentary. Mm-hmm. So there's that season that Michael Jordan, everyone is in agreement that he is one of the best players to be playing. And they keep losing.
And they didn't make the finals.
Right? They didn't make the finals. They lost. And then they realized they need to get the team. And they need to find, I think they're bringing Dennis Rodman, and then they start bringing in all these other players that strengthen. Whereas if they would have just said, oh, we got the best player in the world, we just keep doing this, I'm not sure they would have got there, right? But the coach, Phil Jackson, and the team, they had to adapt. And so you're saying, why do we feel that pain in rejection, and how do we deal with that? I think we feel that pain because we look at a failure, right? We look at it as a complete definition of us, right? We're looking at it as there's that famous statement of like, you know, failure is an event, not a person.
Right.
And I don't know who said it, but it's one of those statements that really clicks. Like failure is an event, not a person. Mm-hmm. Whereas we start thinking we are the failure. Like we say, I am a failure. Exactly, right? Like those are the words, I am a failure. I got rejected. And it's like, no, your application got rejected.
Yeah, your efforts.
Your effort, your specific effort at this moment in time got rejected. Your specific exam at this point got failed. You are not a failure. And so you have to disconnect and distance yourself from the event.
Rule number 6, have desire.
You don't have to be perfect to inspire others. You can inspire people by how you deal with your imperfections, right? Don't feel that you have to have it all, know it all to make an impact. You don't. You just need a soul full of desire and compassion, right? It was Martin Luther King who said, you don't need a college degree to serve. You don't need to know how to fill a sentence to serve. All you need is a heart full of soul, right? And a heart full of compassion. That's all that's needed. That's what we need to focus on. Let's not be limited by feeling we need other resources apart from love and compassion to make an impact, because we don't, right? You actually don't need them.
Rule number 7, be around your supporters.
Find the people that are going to champion you, let them champion you, let them help you grow, and you'll see phenomenal things that happen in your life. Don't give energy to areas that are taking energy away, because they're only going to take more. If someone's criticizing you, if someone's not with you, that's already extracting energy, then you focusing on that is giving up more energy. But when someone out there is supporting you, they're championing you, they're giving you energy, give that energy back to them and see incredible things happen.
Rule number 8, go through the process.
There's that old story of how there's a caterpillar struggling to get out of its cocoon. And a young boy sees this, and he sees the struggle and he sees the pain, and he thinks to himself, oh, I better help this caterpillar out because it needs to go off and become a big butterfly. And so the little boy breaks the cocoon, and by breaking the cocoon, doesn't realize the caterpillar also dies. Because the caterpillar needed that struggle in order to become this beautiful butterfly. And so I really believe that we've all been trapped in this cocoon for the past 5 months. And it's so easy to want to now rush out the other side and just break through and get on with it. But I would say that a more steady and more self-development approach to it, which is like, let me learn through this time. Let me really gain every lesson during this time, because that caterpillar becomes a beautiful butterfly at the other side every time when they allow themselves to go through the process. But when they try and jump the process, skip the process, someone helps them break the process, it can end actually completely the opposite way. And so I think nature is always showing us how to deal with transformation and how to deal with pain and how to deal with negative situations and struggle. And no matter how struggling it is, the biggest mistake humans make is that we try and rush out of pain out the other side. And that's kind of what happened with a few weeks ago, at least in the United States. People tried to rush out of their homes because 5 months have been too long. And then all the numbers went up again. And so that's what happens. Every time we try and rush out of a painful situation, it's almost like, let's just build up that extra piece of resilience, that extra. And I know it's hard. I get it. I know how painful it is. But it's like that is going to create less pain in the future. And I think that's where we have to keep putting that yardstick of like, we have to realize that it's better to go through that consistent, definite struggle that we're going through, but for a future that we really want to create and live in.
Rule number 9, break the cycle.
When we start doing something for nothing, we break the cycle. So I was speaking at a conference last week, and I had a very senior partner at a firm come up to me, and he said to me, you know what, you talked about service, you talked about doing something for nothing, you talked about how happiness neuroscientifically is wired, we're wired for generosity. We're talking about the brain, we're talking about science here. We're not just talking about some nice sentiments. We're not just talking about some nice statements by some philosophers. Those philosopher statements were true, we're now backing them up by science. He said to me, he goes, you know what? I never thought that life was beyond my self-centered journey until I had children. He said, that was the first time I realized that my life was more than just about me. And I was thinking, why wait that long? If we don't have to, why wait that long to recognize that actually we can be happier, more fulfilled, have an impact, make a change in people's lives earlier on by accepting that. So if you've got kids, you can start now anyway, but if you haven't, start now. We can start this habit as early on as possible. We don't have to wait. And we break the cycle when we change it. When I worked in the corporate firms, I recognized that when a new person joined, whether it was an analyst or an associate or a new person joined, they would naturally get all the crap, right? They'd get the rubbish. They'd have to do all the pick me up stuff. They'd have to pick up the pieces of someone else's work. They wouldn't get any exciting projects. The funny thing was, when that analyst, that associate grew to the next level, they treated their junior person joining their team in exactly the same way. That pattern continued. Guess what? When that person got promoted, they treated their junior in exactly the same way. And guess what? That cycle just repeated itself. I want to break that cycle. Right? I want to break that cycle. I want us to be a part of breaking that cycle in society, because we can do it. All of us together. If one of us breaks that cycle, imagine the domino effect that have. Imagine how exponentially that grows when one person decides to do something differently. If you just look at the example, just to look at it in context, or not in context, but looking at a huge example of this, when one person makes a difference, you look at someone like Rosa Parks, the difference that Rosa Parks had, right? on the bus. Imagine that what it takes. Imagine how exponentially that's grown. And all we're saying is give acts of kindness. We're saying let's not treat people badly. Let's not continue that cycle. Let's actually break that cycle.
And rule number 10, the last one before some very special bonus clips, is have fun.
There you go.
How cool was that?
That's fantastic.
Amazing. That was incredible. That was so good. I would so do that again. That was incredible. Oh my gosh. Thank you, man. Thank you to Will. That was amazing. Woo!
It worked out. It worked out.
Now I've got a really special bonus clip that I think you're going to enjoy. But before that, it's time for the question of the day. I want to know, what was your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action for the next week? The science says that when you just watch a video, you get motivated, you get inspired, you have a 35% chance of following through on your goals. 35%? That's not enough. That's not enough just to get motivated. Believe Nation, we're here, you're here. Today matters. You're an action taker. When you commit to a plan of action of when and how you're going to follow through, when you write it down, you have a 91% chance of following through. And when you commit publicly to somebody else, it jumps to 95% chance. From 30-something% to 95% chance of you following through. Believe Nation, we need to make this happen. So question of the day, your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action specific for the next week. Put it down in the comments below, and I'm going to show on screen sometime next week to celebrate you.
Behind that pain is a understanding that I don't have this skill.
Yes.
Or is an understanding of I didn't try hard enough. Or is an understanding of, oh, maybe there's just another option. Because guess what? Sometimes you may have done the best pitch in the world and you just had an executive that didn't like your vibe.
Keep going.
And
keep asking different people.
Keep going. Like you know, you've just got to realize that you have to engage that pain in discovery. And that eases it, because when you discover like for example, let's take my podcast. My podcast producer, the team that was meant to produce my podcast, pulled out 2 weeks before we launched my podcast. And I thought I had this big deal lined up. I was really excited. I'd never launched a podcast before. And I thought, oh yeah, this can be amazing. And I was in India meditating for my annual trip that I take. I come back and the first news I remember receiving is, by the way, this isn't happening anymore. And I'd set that I was going to launch my podcast on Valentine's Day 2019. And I had my episodes recorded with my wife, and I'd already gone out and made the content. So just to tee up how bad that 2 week notice was, I'd already gone to Monaco, interviewed Novak. I'd already interviewed Lily, I'd interviewed Russell Brand in London, I'd interviewed my wife, and obviously those people are all close friends and people I know, so they were very happy to be on the podcast even when it was new. So I'd already done all that effort. I'd already created all the content myself. All this podcast company was going to do was put it out there and help me market it a bit. And then they pull out 2 weeks before it comes out. And I'm going to myself, wow, okay, like I can either sit here and be really sad, or I can scrap together and figure it out. And so the only thing I realized was it actually turned out perfectly, because now I own my podcast.
There you go.
And I'm completely aware of every part of the journey, and it gave me more confidence in myself that I could scrap together when I had to.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it is, that we lack confidence. We're waiting for someone else to tell us how we should feel about ourselves. Our identity should start with unlearning everything that we think we know about ourselves.
Okay.
And
How do we unlearn?
So the best method of unlearning is this. First, and I'm gonna get really strategic and tactical because I think that people need to know what to do rather than a concept. The first thing you do is write down everything you currently are chasing in your life. Make a long list.
Your goals, your dreams,
your goals, your dreams,
accomplishments.
anything that you're currently chasing and pursuing.
Okay.
Write them down. You can write down 3, you can write down 5, you can write down 10, depending on how ambitious you are. Second line, ask yourself, what is the source of that? Where did you get that idea? Did you get that idea from a TV show you saw? Did you get that idea from your parents? Did you get that idea from your mom and your dad, your sister, your cousin? Did you get that idea because your friend just got proposed to on Instagram? Did you get that idea because your friend just got promoted? Did you get that idea because you just broke up?
Right.
Or did you get that idea because you just feel it when you do it, that you feel alive?
So
Ask
give
yourself
me a
that.
specific example that you had when you were 15, 18, was like a goal or accomplishment that you were chasing and where it came from.
Absolutely. So my goal when I was young was to be an investment banker. And when I really asked myself, where did that come from? It came because in my community, small community in London, the most successful person financially was an investment banker. So I believed you had to be an investment banker to be successful.
Right.
So when I asked myself that question, where does that come from? It comes from society's version of success, not mine. And then the third thing you ask yourself is, well, then what is mine? What is coming from inside of me? And if you just do that 3-step process, now what you're doing is you're filtering out the noise and you're starting to listen to your voice. The thing is, you've got a voice inside of you, but it's quiet. It's like Jay, like take note of me, like Lewis, you know, and it's just like trying to get through, and the noise of everyone else's opinions is so loud. So this way you filter it. Well, I really believe that everything we say, that beautiful thought from Gandhi where he said that when what you think, what you say, and what you do are in line, then you'll experience harmony. And I've really taken that to heart, and it's this powerful spiritual principle, and it really means a lot to me.
What you think, what you say,
and what you do are aligned. And so for me, any form of language, any form of your emotional vocabulary is building your mental reality. And I think people forget that their vocabulary is defining their life. You are creating your life on a daily basis by the words you use. So for me, and I'm not saying that I feel that way about everyone else. I'm saying that's how I feel about that word. Someone may say, oh, when I say a swear word, it makes me laugh. For me, it doesn't. That I would only swear when I felt bad and I felt something negative towards something. So for me, that had negative emotions, negative connotations, and negative intention attached to it. So I wanted to remove anything from my vocabulary that I felt was negative. So even as simple as, and I've done this very recently, but it's changed my life, instead of me saying I'm busy or it's been a busy week, I say I'm having a productive week. And I feel different when I go to bed, just by that simple change. I go to bed thinking, yeah, I've had a really productive day today, rather than going, God, I had a busy day today. Like I don't want to wake up tomorrow. I'm going to have a busy day tomorrow. And so that simple emotional vocabulary change has just catapulted my mind into feeling excited and enthusiastic all the time. I was really shy. I didn't enjoy stages. I didn't enjoy speaking. My parents forced me to go to public speaking and drama school. So I spent 14 to 18 in public speaking and drama school. Changed my life. I did not know what I wanted to speak about. So even when I finished at 18, I still didn't like going on stage because I didn't have anything to talk about. So now you've got the tools, but you haven't got the passion. So I developed somewhat of an expertise in 4 years, but I didn't have what I was passionate about. And then when I became a monk, I was like, this is it. This is why I went to public speaking school, because I love talking about philosophy. I love talking about science. I love talking about culture. I love talking about life. I love talking about growth, etc., the mind. So I got what I was passionate about when I became a monk. So for me, the process came from 4 years of consistent public speaking school. Like, it changed my life. And that's all thanks to my parents for forcing me to go. I had no interest in being a public speaker or a storyteller, or any of these things. That was just, I lucked out. And then it was me finding what I was passionate to speak about. And then I've spoken for 3 hours a day for the last 13 years. And I spoke to audiences of 0 all the way to audiences now of thousands. But when I first started speaking, I remember I was invited to speak at a university where I wasn't getting paid for. I was like 20 years old. I was invited to speak to this university. No one showed up twice. So they organized 2 events for me. I was meant to speak about life, philosophy, etc., all the kind of stuff I speak about now, and 0 people turned up. And I practiced my speech both times to an empty room as if it was a packed room, because I was like, I'm still going to practice. And so for me, having done this for 3 hours a day for the last 13 years, that's now being gratefully received online. So I'm very fortunate that it's shifted from an offline world to an online world, which we can dive into. Yeah. But the point is, it's been my absorption and addiction for over a decade now. Yeah, one of the biggest mistakes we make is that we confuse inexperience with being unqualified. So because we've not tried a lot of things, we just naturally believe that we can't be that good at them. Mm-hmm. So if I've never spoken on a stage, I just think, oh, I'm probably not good at that. Or if I've never played golf, I'd probably think, oh, I'm probably not good at that. And so we start writing off things without even trying them. So the best method I can share with someone is take the next month, take the next 4 weekends in the month, that gives you 8 days, and get really tactical. Every single day.
That's why you're playing tennis a lot right now.
Yeah, playing tennis. Take the 8 days, go join a course, an online course, a workshop, go and shadow a friend, go to a seminar, a conference, go to reading a book, listen to a podcast. Go and expose yourself to 8 different things in a month.
8 different things?
8 different things in a month. And guess what? In a month, you will have learned what you probably would have learned in 8 years, because most of us test 1 new thing a year.
Maybe.
If that, exactly, right? Like some people don't even do that. But if you do 8 different things in a month, and this is how you have to see it. If you went to 8 different restaurants in a month, you ask yourself after you eat a meal, like, I had that burrito or I had that taco. Did I like it? Right? The first question you ask yourself is, did I like it?
You gotta try it first.
You gotta try it first. You gotta go to the restaurant.
Yeah.
There's no point. So you gotta say, did I like it? The second question you ask yourself is, why did I or why did I not like it? Mm-hmm. Like, why is so important? I think too many people just go, oh, I like it or I don't like it. Why didn't I like it? And the third question you have to ask yourself, really, really simple, is, do I want to do it again? And if you do, that's where you start uncovering. So my point is, inexperience. Do not misinterpret inexperience for a lack of qualification. In the hope for money, in the hope for success, we end up chasing the wrong things and we make a mess. We end up with less than we started with, end up with more issues than we bargained for. Whilst climbing that ladder and that stairway, we forget why we started climbing in the first place. Once, the king of Bhutan was asked by an interviewer what the GDP of Bhutan was. He was surprised and shocked. He replied by saying, in Bhutan, we don't just measure the GDP, we measure the GNH. Instead of just measuring the gross domestic product, we measure gross national happiness. In the process of getting older, we forget the real goal of life. If you could make a little less and spend more time doing what you love, would that make you happier? Don't trade your happiness for what you think you need. Things can never make us happy because they're temporary and limited, but experiences can last forever. Too many people are working hard on things they don't love, to spend money they don't have, to buy things they don't need, to impress people they don't like. When we create our identity around what we do, a career, a job, an occupation, we can never be happy because we're basing it on something external. But when we create an identity around who we are and what we want to be and become, then anything is possible. And remember, we become successful by what we get, but we become happy by what we give. Don't get the two confused. I start off the chapter with this beautiful thought from Charles Horton Cooley, and I love telling it because it's just the best. And I think it was written in like the 1900s. And he said, today the challenge is, I'm not what I think I am. I'm not what you think I am. I am what I think you think I am.
Yeah, it's crazy, man.
And it's like, it blows my mind. Every time I say it, it gives me the chills, like I feel it. And the reason why I start with identity is because I think that's the root of all our challenges. And the first step to thinking like a monk is starting at the root, not starting at the symptoms or the superficial or the surface level, but let's go to the root. If you're playing a role, if you're wearing a mask, if you're dressed in clothes that are not yours, then you end up living a life that's not yours. And in the book, I give this example of method acting.
Yes, with Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yeah, I'm a massive movie junkie, and I love method actors. So people like Heath Ledger, of course, from the Dark Knight series. You've got Jared Leto. So Jared Leto, when he played the Joker in, this is not in the book, in Suicide Squad, he used to send dead rats in the mail to his co-stars.
He did not.
He did, because he was trying to get into the mindset of how someone that perverted would behave. And then Daniel Day-Lewis, when he was filming for Gangs of New York, he's actually wearing these coats that are centuries old so that he can get into character when he's off camera. Yeah, when he can feel it, right? He's not wearing watches. He's not carrying around his mobile phone. They're speaking in the accents. And he talks about how he actually went crazy. Because guess what? When you fake being someone for so long, you think it's your reality. And that's what happens to all of us. We play a role at work, we play a role at home, we play a role with our family, we play a role with our friends, and then we think that role is us. Envy actually is more of a expression of how we feel about ourselves rather than how we're perceiving someone else. It's actually so much more about how comfortable we feel with who we are, how confident we feel with who we are, how much self-esteem we have, how much self-assurance we have. Envy is more a root of that than it is of the fact that someone else is doing well. It's less about the fact that someone out there is amazing, making waves, doing something that you want to be doing. It's more about how we feel about ourselves, and it's experienced in that way of looking at someone else and reflecting back on us. Social circles, family circles, someone else has done amazingly in their exams, someone just landed a new job, someone else just got promoted, and everyone's looking at you going, what are you doing? Right, what have you achieved? Where are you today? Where have you got? Right, what's happening with you? Tell us about you. And you're thinking, you know, you're going through all your head, you're trying to come up with all the things that you've thought about, all the things that you've achieved, all the things that you've done, and you're trying to bring it up, like constantly. But you're struggling, you find it hard because you're now measuring your growth based on someone else's. You're now measuring your success based on someone else's. And that is the biggest challenge with envy. I think any sorts of dress or any sort of, whether it be, dress or appearance or any of that, if it's taking you away from who you actually are and how you like expressing yourself, then that kind of contradicts being able to be authentic. Literally use your weekends and evenings to do a test on anything. The best way is go and do a course, test it out. Try doing it once. Go and shadow someone who does it, someone in your life that does it. If you want to be a podcaster, come and shadow you guys for a week, right? And see what that life's like. See what it actually looks like to research, to sit with a guest, to find new guests, to work it out. Like, go and shadow someone who's already doing it. And then try and do it for a day. Like, try and do the schedule of someone you look up to for a day. Like, if you can do that for a day and you loved it, then do it for one more day. And if you loved it, do it for another day, and that's going to trickle in. So that's a much smarter way to finding your passion, rather than just sitting there and reflecting, which is cool, which is important, but I'd encourage you to just get out there, right? Get out there and live the life of someone who's doing it when they started. That's another point. Don't focus on what people are doing now. Focus on what they were doing when they started. So a lot of people ask me, they're like, Jay, how many videos do you make a week? I'm like, I make 3 videos a week, plus my podcast on top of that, plus Instagram. And they'll say, oh, wow, that's too much. And I was like, yeah, but when I started, I made 1 video a week, right? Like, you don't have to start at what I'm doing now. Like, you start. So that, you know, go back to that. If while you're writing your book, if while you're recording your podcast, if you're sitting there going, I hope this is going to be number 1. This better be number 1.
I hope I sell more copies
I hope
than
I
this
sell
person.
more copies than this person who's launching at the same time, because that's the only way. Well, guess what? Now the quality of your output right now has just dropped. Because guess what? You're now living 75% in the future and you're 25% right now. And guess what? This 25% is going to define that future goal and result.
And your happiness.
And your happiness.
Whether you get the result or not.
Totally. Whereas for me, when I was writing my book, and of course I want my book to be a best-selling book. Of course I want my podcast to do well. Of course, we don't do anything for it to be lost. Like, no one does that. But what I do know is that when I'm creating, when I'm producing, when I'm writing, that's all I'm doing. See, the truth is that only 2% of the world's population can multitask. Now the crazy thing is
Who are those 2%?
When 2%, when people hear that, they think I'm in that 2%. Like everyone thinks that they're in that. But most of us are the 98%.
Yeah.
And the truth is, there is no such thing as multitasking. What it is fast switching between two tasks. So the quality is just dropping.
Because you cannot do two things at one time.
You cannot. No one genuinely can do two things at once.
I guess you could maybe like pat your head and do this at the same time.
Yeah.
But you can't do something productive at the same time, right?
Or creative. And so what I'm saying is that when you're sitting here going, this needs to be number one, you are reducing that thing's ability to be number one because it now doesn't have your full focus.
Right.
So that's the difference maker, that you can want to be number one, there's nothing wrong with that, but you can't keep comparing what number one is to someone else's goal too, because everyone's got a different trajectory. Like there are some people that are kind of come in and do really well at one thing and you're going to do really well at another. And that's why competition has to first be in your space. Like don't compete in a space that's not yours. I'd literally experimented with everything with my health, even as a monk, and I tried week-long fasts and I'd pushed myself without sleep. I used to sleep like 4 to 6 hours a night. And I got to a point where I was like, I need to take care of my health. I need to make my health a priority, because I was so fascinated about mastering the mind that I almost neglected the needs of the body. And I can definitely say that I got to incredible places with my mind, but at the expense of sacrificing my caretaking of my body. And I felt I wanted to go back and do both of them together. And so a lot of my friends will say, Jay, you always look like you've got something exciting going on in life. And I'm like, yeah, I do. But that's because like 9 people told me that my other ideas sucked, right? And so like I get more wins because I get more failures. Because I'm failing so often, I'm trying so many things out so often that don't go right. And then everyone sees the one thing that goes right. And that's how it works. And that's the odds for anyone. That's not just me. Anyone who's doing what they love every day is trying 100 different things, and most of them are not working. But because they're playing the game of numbers, something's got to work. Like that's how I live. I'm just like, if I try 10 things this year, one of them's got to work. But if I try one thing this year, most likely it probably won't work. Right. And that's the biggest challenge. If we just up our experiments, like you gotta, do something new for every weekend this year. Once there was a farmer who worked extremely hard. He worked diligently every single day to make sure he had the healthiest crops and the healthiest fields. As he worked, he often looked towards the opposite farm. That farm always seemed healthier, more lush, and more green. He would often start to envy that farmer and feel some jealousy inside of himself. He would sometimes say to himself, maybe they have better land, maybe they get more rain, maybe it's because that farmer has more money from his family or his parents. Sometimes he'd say to himself, it's because that farmer has better tools or better tractors to plow the land. Often he'd think, it's because he's got more help from his children than I do. Every day, every week, every month, every year, this farmer was feeling more and more envious, seeing the lush, green, healthy, abundant land on the other side. He'd constantly wonder and be trying to figure out why it was that farmer had the greener land. Till one day he realized he couldn't stand it anymore and he was going to go and find out. He made a route with a plan to get to the other farm. He went through the woods, over the hills, through thorns, through bushes, through all of these challenges to get to that side, to get to that farm. And then he finally made it. But when he got there, he was completely shocked, completely confused. He thought to himself, maybe I'm lost. He felt like he was standing on his ground again. He felt like he'd gone around in a circle and ended up in exactly the same place. He thought this because when he looked across again to the other farm, it looked lush, green, and healthy. And where he was standing seemed average and normal. But when he looked back over to the other side, he saw his children playing on the farm. He had made it to the other side. And that day, he learned an extremely important lesson. He realized after making it to the farm that he envied that the grass always seems greener on the other side. But then he went one step further. He realized that the grass is not just greener on the other side, it's greener where you water it. And whoever looks for greener grass on the other side will never be able to recognize, notice, or appreciate the grass that was beneath their feet the whole entire time. The way I see it is that competition in and of itself is not good or bad. And this is like the monk mindset on 99% of things, that this mug is not good or bad. It can be filled with water or it could be filled with poison.
Yes.
And so competition, I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
As monks, our competition is in how much love and respect we show to each other.
That's your competition?
Like that's what you compete on.
Or how long can we meditate for?
No.
I can meditate longer than you.
So if any monk is sitting, and I did this plenty of times.
Really?
If I sat there and I thought, oh yeah, look at him, he's scratching his back. He got out like that.
Moved.
Your meditation just got destroyed. Right? All the value. And so monks will never ask how long you meditate. They focus on how deep you meditate. And someone who meditates deep doesn't go on about how deep it was.
Right.
But you compete for showing respect. You compete for serving each other. You compete for how well you can collaborate. And I feel like you live this.
Yes.
Like
yes.
I feel like you have
No,
this.
I didn't used to do that.
Yeah.
But the last 7
you do
years,
that now.
yeah,
Like you think like a monk. Like I feel like we're always trying to find a way where we can be better friends to each other and support each other.
Yeah.
And so you're competing on that. And that's a positive competition that I think you can have. So you can still use, and this is the beautiful thing about the monk mindset, you can use any thing in a positive way. Everyone you love and respect and look up to, that's been their path. And I think that's what's given me so much, that's what's liberated me from it. Like Steve Jobs is one of my biggest role models in certain areas of his life. And when I've read his biography by Walter Isaacson, it's like the guy has failed so many times, yet all of us, like most of us, have a phone that's an iPhone or an Apple product in our home or whatever it is. It's like he's not worried about all those times it went wrong because he obviously won big in this area of his life. So my take's just everyone you look up to, whether it's an athlete, an entrepreneur, a coach, a CEO, whatever it is, they have messed up so many times. And just know that. So when you're messing up, you're on the path. Like you're on the same path, right? And I encourage people to share what they're failing at too, because it just helps. Something that happens is you have to surround yourself by peers in a space too who understand you and don't see you as competition. And that's really hard, and it's like a fine line. I genuinely believe that collaboration wins always. So my whole approach to most things has always been, hey, I want to collaborate with you. Whether I'm bigger on social media or smaller on social media, I'm just like, I just want to work together because I think that's going to win long term for all of us. Both, not just in terms of success and numbers, but more in terms of, I want to be friends with you. And so I reach out regularly to people that I admire in different ways. And I reach out to them and say, hey, I'd love to get to know you. I'd love to learn from you. I'd love to connect. I'd love to be a friend. Like, not I'd love for you to teach me how you do this. And if that comes naturally from that relationship, amazing. If it never evolves into that, I've just got a great friend who now gets me. So I try and make friends in two areas. One is in an area of people who understand my life, because I feel the conversations you can have with someone who does exactly what you do are just so great because they already get you, right? And someone that I had on my podcast lately, her name's Lily Singh, Superwoman. She's become a recent friend. She's been incredibly and is incredibly successful on social media. She's using her platform for doing amazing good in the world. And she was someone I reached out to because I was just like, hey, like you've been doing all of this for a while. You started on YouTube a lot longer than I did. And I would just love to connect from you and hear from you. And she's become an incredible friend. And we've just been sharing ideas and learning together. And it's like that relationship's awesome. And then at the same time, I'm trying to find people who are not in media. So I still have friendships with the monks back in India. And I just spent January in India for a month. I was meditating again for roughly about 21 days. And I have them in my life because they remind me of like the roots. And they remind me of the truths that bring me back. So I kind of like both. I love people who totally get my space. And usually those are people I reach out to. And then I love having my roots down. So most of my inner circle now is from people I've reached out to. or they become people who've been reaching out to me for a long, long time and have been consistently reaching out to me asking for nothing. I'd say I was quite rebellious and independent even as a monk. A lot of part of a monk's life is conforming and accepting authority and following a path. And those are all beautiful things for people who like those things. For me, it was a great training ground and a great system of giving me abilities and skills and habits that I didn't have before. But then I really felt a deep calling in my heart to want to share this in a specific way. So I kind of feel dragged to do what I do now because it's so deeply in me to want to make things relevant, non-sectarian, universal, and accepting of all truths and paths. It's just there, and I can't ignore it. And I got to a point in my monk life where I just felt I can't ignore this desire to want to go and spread this wisdom and insight in a way, independently, in a way that I feel will work and help people, from an impact point of view. And so that was a big part of it. The challenge is that we think things come with emotions.
Feelings.
We think things come with feelings and emotions. And guess what? They don't. So if you chase money...
Well, they might for a moment, right? Or they won't?
I don't think they even do.
It's a false sense
It's
of
such
feeling.
a false sense of feeling. I don't, maybe for a moment, but it's so short-lived that it's not even worth counting almost. So it's like when you think that I'm chasing money, guess what? You will get money.
Yep.
And that's great. Money is really important. And money is a really important resource. But guess what? Money's not now gonna fill that gap, that void, that feeling, that emotion that you're missing in your life.
What are most people missing?
We're missing a deep sense of love. I think the biggest need in the world, as we've heard many times before from all the ancient texts, they summarize it like this: to love and be loved. Like that is the need of humanity, to love and be loved. And when we don't experience that, we then start looking for status. We then start looking for money. Then we then start looking for recognition.
To help us give the feeling of false sense of love.
Correct. And the challenge is because most of us didn't experience that from our parents, and this is the key thing, what we crave in life is what we did or didn't get from our parents. Mm-hmm. What our parents did give us is what we continue to crave, or what they didn't give us is what we continue to crave. Mm-hmm. So you'll find that most people's love languages that they chase are things that their parents didn't give them. So if their parents didn't give them time, they now crave everyone's time. If their parents didn't give them gifts, they crave gifts. If their parents didn't give them acts of service, they're craving those acts of service. So it's because of our childhood. And if we don't learn to process all of that experience, which most people never get the time to do, and I empathize with that because I've had to go through that. I've seen me repeating my parents' patterns.
What was the thing you were craving?
So I would crave... A big thing for me was I would crave surprises and gifts because...
That's your thing.
Yeah, that's my thing.
Still is your thing.
It's still my thing.
Yeah.
And I...
Did your parents not do that for you?
No, they did. My mom did a lot of it.
That's why you still crave it.
Correct. So my mom would always, every year on my birthday, she'd always surprise me with the one thing I wanted. And I wasn't spoiled growing up. I didn't have a lot growing up, but she would get that one thing, whether it was like a Power Rangers toy or whether it was, whatever it was, something,
Video game.
Yeah, thing is you want as a kid, right? And she would always surprise me with that. And that became so deep-rooted. Now, I'll give you an example. When I then married my wife, you just expect people to know that.
That they're gonna do the same thing.
Totally. And so now
she didn't do that.
No, because I'm expecting my wife to be like my mom in the sense of I expect her to surprise or show me love in the same way. And she doesn't know that. She's not a mind reader. I can't expect her to know that. So it took communication. It took time for me to explain that. So anyway, I think that's where it stems from. That desire, it doesn't come from you can say it comes from society and education. Of course it does. But I think the deepest place it comes is what your parents did or didn't give you. Now, I've seen some stories about some phenomenal Paralympians. I've seen some phenomenal stories about human beings who without arms and legs have achieved extraordinary feats. And this blows my mind because I always think some of us have challenges in different areas, but imagine being born without legs or arms or, actually not having stuff that we all take for granted. But those are for some people, that would be an absolute dream to have that. Now through robotics and bionic limbs, they can have that. But for years they've lived without it, but still I've seen positivity in them. I've seen drive in them. I've seen a desire in them to achieve something phenomenal. So it's amazing what's happening out there. And we really have to connect with those stories rather than living in our small bubble. And often because we only live in our small bubble, we talk to the same people. right? One of the biggest challenges with envy is that we talk to the same people and they talk to each other. A young boy once asked his teacher, what's the difference between I like you and I love you? The teacher beautifully answered, well, it's like a flower. If you like a flower, you pluck it. But if you love a flower, you water it and nurture it daily and watch it grow. There is such a thin line between like and love. And because of it, we make so many mistakes in our relationships. When we want something in the moment, we take it and don't think any further. We do whatever we want to get that feeling of pleasure, not realizing that we're neither satisfied by that pleasure and nor will that thing last. When we pluck a flower, not only will that flower die, but we can't experience it for any longer than that moment. When you water it and take care of it daily, you can experience it forever. We've been wired towards an instant gratification, instant pleasure mindset. All of the adverts that we see, whether they're online or offline, are geared to driving us towards making instant decisions for instant promises of pleasure. The catch is, not only does that instant pleasure not satisfy us, the feeling doesn't last. We're so used to seeing all the straplines and headlines on the internet. Learn this language in 5 minutes. Get the ideal body in 10 minutes a day. Become a millionaire in 12 months. Now all of these sound brilliant, right? The problem is, they're not real. They're not true. They're false promises. The reason why it works is because it appeals to one of the most basic human desires. Situational improvement without major resource investment. Of course, you can pick up a few words in another language or shed a few pounds of weight if that was your goal. Or maybe you will make a little bit more money. But real knowledge, real awareness, real fitness, real business, all of these things take time. Real relationships, real connection, real purpose takes time. Naturally, the internet headlines focus on the short term instead of the long term. Because most of us would never click on something if it said, learn a language in 5 years with dedicated daily practice. We wouldn't click on something that said, here is the 1 hour workout that you need to do every single day. And we wouldn't click on the one that said, if you want to be a millionaire, here are the 10 failures that you'll go through in year 1, how broke you might be by year 3, and you may not even make it by year 9. The important lesson here is, if you want meaning, if you want purpose, if you want fulfillment, those things take time. How boring would it be to live in a world where everyone was just like us? Imagine if everyone in your life talked like you, thought like you, walked like you. The world would be a boring place. There'd be no new cultures to explore, no new languages to learn. And I just sense energy intuitively too. Like I'll take a meeting with someone and decide in a meeting whether I'm gonna speak to them again or not. And I just trust that because my intuition's, I've been trying to strengthen it over the years and it rarely lets me down. So I kind of go with that a lot. And my encouragement to everyone listening is you have a powerful intuition, you're just covering it with your head. So just listen to how you feel when you're with someone. Like listen to your heart, listen to your gut, listen to your instinct, because it's probably usually right. Don't let your head get in there and make stuff up. The thing is to get really close to that fear. So what we usually do is embrace it, get close to it, get intimate with it. We
become the bat. Sit in the bat cave.
Literally, yeah.
And embrace the fear.
Totally. Yeah. We run away from fear. We like to run away and go, oh, it's not coming with me. Or what we do is we hear one thing and we define the whole understanding of our fear based on that one thing.
Yes.
So it's like someone, and I'll give you a normal example in a normal life scenario.
Yes.
Someone says to you in the office, you know that they're gonna cut a few people. Uh-huh. And you don't even check. You don't even know.
Is it real?
And now you just made it real and now you're running with it and you're trying to run away from it. So you're trying to avoid conversations with your boss. You're trying to avoid any conflict. You're trying to, you're just trying to avoid it. And so actually what you need to do is go, okay, let me actually discover that fear. Let me go intimate with that fear. Let me ask myself, where's that fear coming from? What am I really scared of? What am I really scared of? Am I really scared of losing my job? Am I scared of not having any money? What am I really scared of? And when you get to the root, and I call it the why ladder in the book. So it's asking yourself, what am I scared of? And then go, why am I scared of this? Why am I scared of this? Why am I scared of this? And when you can't ask why any longer, you've got to the answer, and that's what you have to deal with. Most of us are not dealing with what we're actually scared of. So that's how you let go. You let go by keep asking yourself. So I'll give you an example of mine. Like if I heard that, or if you hear that in your office that people are getting cut, it's like, you just get scared and panicked. But the question is, why am I scared of that? Am I scared of that because I haven't been working hard for 6 months? Am I scared of that because I've been skipping meetings? Am I scared of that because I know my boss will probably fire me first? Or am I scared because I've been performing really well and I'm expecting a promotion? Knowing which one it is sets you up to build the path forward. Not knowing that just puts you in this panic frenzy. Anything that happens from an external item or something that's induced from something external never feels like you earned it. It never feels like you got there yourself. And hence you become a dependent person on that experience. Whereas when you've built something, it's your experience to go back to at any point. And the thing I love about that is that there's this awesome part in this movie called Limitless, where Robert De Niro is talking to Bradley Cooper, and Bradley Cooper's taking a pill to be limitless. And Robert De Niro goes, you know what? I know you've taken something. I know you think you're smarter than you are, but because you haven't worked for it, you don't know how to use it. And therefore you will fall down, therefore you will fail. And it's such an interesting, and I feel the same way, that any experience that's coming from anything external, we will feel insecure when we don't have it. Whereas when you've meditated and you've really worked hard at building those experiences and that discipline and going deep, you know you can access that at any point in your life. And that's the beauty of doing it yourself.
You talked about the fear of fear and how you had to learn to let go of your fear of fear. What does that actually mean, letting go of the fear of fear?
Yeah, so I talk about how we fear the wrong things.
What do we fear?
So most of us are fearful of how our friends are reacting, what's happening on social media, and what's the random bit of news that we heard. None of it is fact-based. That's one of the biggest issues that we have. It's worry-based. It's worry-based, and it's also imagination-based. So we become fiction writers. We've all watched too many movies. Now we start writing these beautiful movies in our head. Well, not beautiful, scary movies in our head of what may happen. So our imagination, and Seneca said it best, we suffer twice. One in reality and one in imagination, right? We suffer twice. And this is the biggest...
What actually happens to us, and then the story we continue to tell ourselves.
Totally. Now there's this incredible study in the book that I have to talk about. So they took monks and they took non-monks, and they
competed against each other.
They competed against each other, literally. So they put this plate where you experience heat. And so what happens is the non-monks touch this plate. Now this plate heats up gradually, softly, and then at one point it gets really hot for 10 seconds and then it cools down. And so what happened is that when the non-monks touched it, the anxiety and pressure and stress in their brain just triggered straight away, even though it wasn't that hot.
It wasn't hot.
It was heating, but it wasn't hot to do anything major to you. But the anxiety and stress in imagination or in anticipation went through the roof in the non-monks. Now this is what's fascinating. When the monks touched it, they showed that it didn't feel anything as it rose, but as it got to its highest, they felt physical pain, but they showed no trigger of emotional pain because they did not assign any emotional element to that pain. So my point with that is, you can look at the news right now and you can get scared straight away and get in complete freeze mode, feeling stuck, paralyzed, whatever it is, because what you're now doing is you're creating a story of what's going to happen. And that story...
And you can cause sickness in yourself.
You can cause sickness
just by
inside
the story,
yourself.
not actually...
The reality.
The facts of the disease hitting you or something happening physically to you.
Totally. And that story, again, can be used positively. So your story may actually be true. But if it's going to be true, now you can prepare. And that shifts you away from being scared because now you're preparing.
Yes.
And so the real
You can be confident because you prepared.
Exactly. And so we should be shifting our fear energy into preparation energy. Because what fear does is it keeps you locked there, right? We just feel stuck. I'll give you an example. Like when you were preparing for big games, when you used to play in the NFL, right? And you're playing American football against some of the biggest athletes in the world, it's like you can either sit there and be scared that you're going to play this game on the weekend, or you can prepare. And your confidence is in the preparation. So when people go, how do I feel confident right now? Are you preparing?
Are you putting the reps?
Are you putting the reps?
Yeah.
Are you building your immunity? Are you taking your vitamins? Are you
Drinking lots of water?
Are you drinking lots of water? Are you taking the steps that are needed to prepare for whatever's coming? There are some times when I'm with a social media person who says something really useful for my roots, and there's sometimes when I'm with roots and they say something else. And there's a great story actually about when the Prime Minister of India, Modi, he visited Facebook, and Mark Zuckerberg interviewed him at Facebook at the headquarters. And Mark Zuckerberg told a story. He said that when he was struggling with the direction of Facebook in 2009, he went up to his mentor to ask a question. Now, Mark Zuckerberg's mentor happened to be Steve Jobs. And so he went up to Steve Jobs and he said, Steve, I'm struggling with the direction of Facebook. What do I do? And at that time, you know, I mean, Steve Jobs is Steve Jobs. He could have said anything and it would have made sense. But you know, he could have said, go and meet a venture capitalist. He could have said, go and meet an investor. He could have said, go and meet a tech company. He could have said, I'll tell you what to do. Instead, he said, I think you need to go to India and spend some time in an ashram, a monastery in India with monks. He goes, when you do that, you'll find the answer of what you want to do. And to me, that is exactly why the people that are most successful in this world are successful, because they surround themselves with people who have differing beliefs. And MIT did a research study on this. They found that people who are more innovative and creative in an organization knew people who didn't know each other. So when you know people who all know each other, you end up with the same answer, the same belief, and confirmation bias exists, and you just keep building that echo chamber. Whereas if you've got two people who don't agree and you get a checking system, then you can trust your gut and go with what you believe. So I think I try and move away from having people around me. And it's not just yes men or yes women. It's not just about that. It's about building a circle of people, like you said, that want different things for you and knowing what they want for you. So when I'm with my mom, all my mom cares about is my health, right? My mom does not care how successful I am, how many videos I have, how many people I help, even that. Like my mom will get over that. She's like, how's your health? Like, are you taking care of yourself? Are you sleeping well? Are you eating well? Like, that's my mom. And it's like, if I go and I measure everything, most of that, that's wrong. But if I know that that's what my mom wants for me, that's beautiful. That's what I get from her. And she'll take care of that. And same, you know, everyone plays a different role in your life. Don't expect everyone to play the role you want, and don't expect everyone to play the same role. Recognize that everyone's playing their role in your life and let them play it. That's what makes a good movie. So the two extremes that most of us experience are either I have to think I'm the best, I'm the best in the world, I can crush anyone, like I'm like gonna show everyone what I'm like, or most of us experience the other extreme, which is I'm the worst. I'm the stupidest, I'm the dumbest, I'm the most worthless, I'm the biggest loser. Notice how that's both ego.
Really?
Ego, yes.
Why is the negative
so
ego?
The ego wants to be the best of the best, or the ego wants to be the worst of the worst. The ego won't accept being in the middle.
Really?
The ego wants to feel the deepest sense of being the lowest. And that's why victim mentality is actually a subsequence of ego.
Really?
Yeah, that's how it's explained in the Bhagavad Gita, because the point is that you can't deal with just being bad, you have to be the worst.
My pain is the worst. I think Jada talked about this on your podcast, where she was like, you know, I had to tell people why my hurt was more painful than their hurt, and they could never understand how bad it was. Right?
Exactly. That's
ego as well.
That's ego as well. So you see these two sides of ego keeping us locked away. And so the only way to get with that, and the only way to balance it and bring it all into one, is genuine self-honesty. Honesty is the best place to be. And the best thing about honesty is, I'm really good at this, I'm really average at that, and I'm really bad at that. And the challenge we have with that is most of us have no idea. We just have zero self-awareness about what we are good at, what we are bad at, and what we're average at. So we think, I'm pretty average at everything, I'm pretty good at everything. And when I hear those answers, I'm like, simple things, just go and talk to people that know you.
Yeah, what am I great at?
Ask them, what's my superpower?
Yeah.
What do I do differently? What do you think I do that is different that no one else does? And guess what? I guarantee you, if you ask a colleague, if you ask a friend, if you ask a family member, if you ask people from
different things
they'll say different things. But you get to learn about yourself. So real confidence comes from knowing your strengths and going all in on them. Your confidence does not come from just standing up the right way or just saying the right stuff to yourself.
Body language only.
Yeah, and that's important. I'm a big believer in all of that, but what I'm saying is that doesn't build real confidence. Real confidence comes from thinking, I'm really good at this, I know I can do this, and I love doing it. And really, this is the most important bit. Confidence comes from serving other people. When you see the impact you have on others, and this is the biggest issue, the reason why we have such low self-esteem today in the world is because people are not serving others. So they don't see the profound impact they have on others. When you put out a video or a podcast and people tag you on Instagram and they say, Lewis, you stopped me from depression, or you helped me out of a divorce. Or people, when they watch my content, they'll be like, that stopped me from committing suicide, or whatever it is. When you see that, you get such a deep sense of self-worth that you matter. And guess what? Everyone matters. Whether you matter to 1 people or 1 million people, everyone matters. But if you see your impact on someone's life, you will feel such a deep sense of self-worth. And so whether you're serving at a, giving out free food, or whether you're serving at a local charity place, or whether you're serving through your work, serve, 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 because when you take that step, you get a boost of self-esteem. Every day we recharge our phones, but we forget to recharge ourselves. Let's just say we slept well the night before, which means we start our day with 100% charge. When we wake up in the morning, we roll over, and 80% of us check our smartphones before we brush our teeth. We scroll through social media, we browse through emails. That takes away 10% of our energy. Let's say we now have 90% charge left. We then commute to work. We spend our day in the office, in meetings, interacting with colleagues, finishing off projects and assignments. We now have 40% charge left. On the way home, we commute through traffic or on the train, and that takes away another, let's say 10%. We now have 30% charge left. We come home and switch on Netflix, talk to someone about what our day was like, and sometimes we lose another 10%. We now have 20% charge left. At 20% on our phones, usually the charge bar goes red. We get an alert. We get a message that tells us that we only have 20% battery left. The question is, do we notice when our charge is at 20% or 10%? There are always signs from our bodies, our brains, our minds. But are we tuned in? One of the best things we can do to recharge is to exercise. The hardest part of any workout is actually the 15 minutes leading up to it. We come up with 15 reasons why we don't want to sweat, and we change our mind 15 different times. CNN reports that when you work out, your brain creates more serotonin, which sends messages to your nervous system of happiness and well-being. Working out for 30 to 40 minutes every day can recharge our battery by 20%. Meditation is an incredible way to recharge our batteries. Exactly what the gym does for the body, meditation can do for the mind. Meditation gives us downtime, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Meditation also directly impacts your entire nervous system by reducing your body's productions of stress-related chemicals such as cortisol. Meditation is a great way to recharge and can take you back up 20%. We've all heard about incredible morning routines, but the one thing that can make a huge difference to your recharge is your evening routine. 35% of us are not getting the recommended 7 hours of sleep per night. Remember, every body and mind is different. Make sure you find the amount of time you need to get that serious battery recharge. And the 75-year study by Harvard found that beyond anything, the real sense check for happiness and meaning in life was relationships, connections, interactions with depth that are fulfilling and full of joy. Making time for deep, meaningful interactions every day can give the recharge our battery seriously needs. What if we've recharged ourselves as much as we recharge our phones? Because if we don't, we'll end up like one of our phones in the bottom of some drawer in our home. So there's a book that I love called The Journey Home. It's the story of a man who hitchhiked at the age of 19 from America and London across the world in search for the truth. And it's incredible because it shows that desire as a true seeker, and it's got travel, it's got potential romance opportunity. It's got that sacrifice. It's got everything. And it's just, it's a true story. It's an autobiography. It's just a really incredible story of how someone can truly seek the truth and want to find themselves and what that takes and what that looks like. So that book is incredible. It's called The Journey Home by Radhanath Swami. It's an autobiography. It's incredible. I highly recommend it. And then the Bhagavad Gita is the book I studied as a monk. It's 5,000 years old. It's the story of a warrior getting advice from a divine coach, getting insight into life. It's a book that's like the classic of India. And today, most knowledge that I read seems like it stems from it. Like there's rarely a quote or an Instagram quote or a Tumblr quote that I find that wasn't influenced by the Bhagavad Gita. It's not the easiest read, but it's incredible if you dive into it with someone who knows it well. So we're actually creating bubbles of reality that are almost illusion-like, somewhat inception-like. We're almost creating a dream within a dream within a dream, and you get so lost in that definition of success that you forget a broader, higher perspective definition of success. Does that resonate? Does that make sense? That often what happens is that we're so in our closed groups, we don't open up to what's actually happening outside in the world. So I'm talking about these people with robotic arms and legs, bionic arms and legs, people Paralympians who are proving phenomenal things without even having limbs. Can you imagine that? It's an amazing achievement. Definitely take a look at it. Here's the shocking truth about loneliness. This is why we need to take it more seriously. Surveys show 1 out of 3 adults are lonely. And the health impacts of loneliness are shocking. Studies have shown that people who are lonely are 50% more likely to die before their time. Researchers show that loneliness is as damaging to our health as not smoking 1, not 2, but 15 cigarettes per day. Only around half of Americans say they have meaningful face-to-face interactions with a loved one, family, or friend every single day. Members of Generation Z say they are the loneliest generation and experience more health problems as a result of it. Loneliness was also linked with less physical activity, compulsive use of digital technology, and not being able to share our problems with others. In a study of 20,000 adults, 54% say that they don't know one person that knows them well. Additionally, 56% of people said that the people they surround themselves with are not necessarily with them. And approximately 40% said that they lack companionship, don't have meaningful relationships, and feel isolated. All of us have been in a crowd but felt lonely. All of us have been invited to a party but wanted to leave. All of us have likes on social media but don't feel loved in real life. So many of us can get comments on our posts but can't get a friend to call us back. Loneliness is real. So here's what we have to do. After studying over 2,500 consumers over 6 years, research found that people that see material possessions as a sign of success felt more lonely. Investing our money in experience rather than things is a great way of breaking the loneliness and materialism cycle. Schedule a time each day to talk to a friend. Take a class to learn something new. Volunteer to deepen your sense of purpose. Spend time with people who look more like your future than your past. The mental health charity Mind cites 2 factors that can cause loneliness. Someone either not having enough social contact or, more interestingly, being surrounded by people but not feeling understood, loved, or cared for. Notice, it's not just being around people, but being understood. It's not just being invited and present, but feeling like you're contributing. Loneliness really comes then from a lack of significance or lack of worth and what you bring to the table and what value you truly offer. Lonely is not being alone. It's the feeling that no one loves you. So start by loving yourself. We live in a world where people get ghosted more than they get texted. I hear it all the time from friends, from people that I meet, from people that I connect with, that so many of them have been ghosted. And all of these people are intelligent, creative, talented, beautiful, amazing people who've all experienced ghosting. If you've ever been ghosted, recognize that it really isn't a reflection of you. It's so important that we don't lead people on. It's so important that we don't make people believe that we like them or even love them if we don't. It's so dangerous to play with someone's emotions because you have no idea the damage you're causing. Don't lie to people thinking that they won't find out. They probably will. We live in a much smaller world than we believe. And don't be with someone just because you feel alone for a period of time. Don't just be with someone to fill in your gaps. Imagine what that would feel like if someone did that to you. And don't let people get attached and then drop them like they don't even matter. And don't talk to someone just because they make you feel better about yourself for a little bit of time, but you don't feel the same way. And remember, someone disappearing doesn't reflect your worth, it reflects their priorities. When someone disappears, don't let them reappear just because they feel like it. And if you've ever been ghosted, just remember, it's better they did it now rather than later on.
If you want even more Jay Shetty, check out the video right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
And we talk a lot about today self-love and self-care, but I think, a lot of that starts with self-awareness, which we know about, self-knowledge, but self-knowledge creates self-trust.